The Lives of the Saints by Father Alban Butler. June 6. Blessed Marcelino José Benito Champagnat. Jean-Baptiste Champagnat, a farmer and miller in the village of Rosy, in the commune of Marles, Loire, had 10 children with his wife, Marie. The 8th, Marcellin Baptiste Joseph, was born on May 20th, 1789, and baptized the following day. He grew up without attending school and was always with a religious aunt of his, a refugee in his father's house, who told him the lives of the saints and launched furious anathemas against the revolution. Little Marcellin, who had not experienced the effects of the conflagration, did not know whether he was a bad person or a ferocious beast. He made his first communion in the spring of 1800. From a very young age, he helped his father, and as he was very dexterous, he learned numerous trades, in particular masonry. He also had a business sense. His father having given him 2 or 3 lambs, he raised them and sold them, making a profit, which he used to buy others, until he was able to quickly raise a capital of 600 francs. As gifted as he was for business and for manual trades, one day he heard a proposition to follow a very different path. When he was promoted to the Archbishopric of Lyon, Cardinal Frêche, Napoleon's uncle, took care to recruit his seminarians, and in order to awaken vocations, sent priests to the countryside. One of them passed through Marles and spoke of vocations to Champagnat's sons. Marcellin made up his mind at once. He would become a priest. His father was not opposed in principle, but he had his doubts, because he knew that his son did not have the facility to learn. His father died on June 3, 1804. His widow, more optimistic, courageously decided to help her son realize his hopes. She entrusted him to her son-in-law Arnold, a teacher in Saint-Sauveur, who, praising his pupil's application, soon declared that he did not have the ability to undertake long studies. Neither Marcellin nor his mother accepted Arnold's statement with docility and left for La Louvesque, where Marcellin applied for admission to the small seminary of Verrières near Montbrison. There he entered in October 1805. The money he had earned raising sheep enabled him to acquire his trousseau without being a burden on the family budget. The small seminary of Verrières was one of those ecclesiastical schools improvised after the Revolution by priests full of goodwill and trust in God. There, the young men learned to exercise piety, studied French and Latin. Poorly housed, almost without heating, fed like Spartans, they obeyed a rather vague set of rules that left much room for the unexpected. Marcellin's beginnings were painful. Older than his fellow students, he had less memory than they, and the superior, who esteemed him for his piety and virtue, announced that he would be forced to dismiss him because of his ineptitude for studies. He was saved from expulsion by his stubborn effort to learn, and the help of a very dear friend of his, Jean-Louis Duplay, who, like him, had been slow to follow his vocation. On June 24, 1810, Marcellin suffered the pain of losing his mother, who had supported him so courageously. He did not, however, give up his studies or slacken in his application. He began his philosophy course at Verrières, along with 2 fellow students who were to become illustrious, Jean-Claude Collin, who was brilliantly at the top of his class, and Jean-Marie Vianney, who seemed less suited than Marcellin to his studies and was unable to enter the great seminary of Lyon with him in October 1813. The urgent needs of the Church seemed to justify rapid studies. On January 6, 1814, Cardinal Fesch conferred on Marcellin Champagnat the tonsure, minor orders, and the subdeaconate. He was ordained a deacon on June 23, 1815, and a priest on July 22, 1816. There were 12 seminarians who, during their years of study, cherished the project of founding a congregation under the patronage of Mary with the approval of the director. As soon as the 12, including Marcellin, were ordained, they made a pact to carry out the project, if possible. Marcellin was appointed vicar of La Valle, near Saint-Chamond, Loire. The parish priest of the place, elderly and incapable of speaking in public, was very happy with the arrival of an assistant to govern the vast parish, situated among mountains and in a moral state analogous to that of ours when Jean-Marie Vianney was appointed to it. The parishioners liked to spend their evenings in taverns. The young people gathered to dance in a manner not always convenient. The adults and their children knew very little about religion and experienced a certain suspicion towards the priests. Marcellin Champagnat set about solving all these problems at once. He organized catechism classes, first in the parish church and then in the neighboring villages. He appeared abruptly in the middle of the dances, putting the dancers to flight. He held meetings for the principal people and lent them books, exchanging them for the widespread ungodly editions of the 18th century. One day, the vicar was called to assist a 12-year-old boy who was seriously ill. Wanting to confess, he was pained to find that the poor dying child was ignorant of everything about religion. He instructed him in 2 hours on the principal mysteries in order to prepare him for death, which was not long in coming. This tragic incident made Marcellin feel deeply the abandonment in which the peasants lived. Champagnat bought a house and installed them there on January 2, 1817, without assigning them any apostolic function or even explaining to them what he intended to do. Above all, he wanted to give them a solid formation. He gave them an austere rule. In the greatest poverty and in the most perfect recollection, they alternated prayers with manual labor. The cultivation of a vegetable garden and the sowing of spices assured their subsistence. Other young people came to join the first two. They were all animated by the same goodwill. Father Champagnat, who wanted to make them teachers, discovered a teacher who gave them lessons for a few months. Very soon, they themselves were able to open an elementary school which received the children of the village and took in some orphans. The needs were so many and the goodwill of the new teachers so manifest that the success was complete and immediate, to the extent that the founder came to fear that it would go to his brothers' heads and that they would dissipate to the detriment of the religious life. To prevent this relaxation, he installed himself in the house and kept a close watch on them. Scarcely had the school at La Valle been opened when requests began to reach Father Champagnat for the sending of brothers. The first one to leave the house went to the village of Bessat, the furthest from the parish church, to teach catechism to its disinherited inhabitants. Then the parish priest of Marlis asked for brothers, and Father Champagnat was happy to be able to benefit his home parish. Unfortunately, the parish priest of Marlis had no confidence in his former parishioner. After having tried to keep Brother Louis against the will of his superior, who was calling him, he stubbornly maintained the school in a dilapidated house, regardless of the anger of the parents of the pupils and at the risk of harming their health and that of their teachers. Faced with this ill will, the founder did not want to compromise and called all his brothers. He was never in danger of seeing them out of work. Throughout his life, he received more demands than he could satisfy. On All Saints' Day 1820, he opened a school at Saint-Sauveur-en-Rue, then others in the large town of Bourg-Argental, at Saint-Symphorien-le-Château, at Beaulieu, Vanosque, etc. And all these departures of brothers seemed to attract more vocations. Very soon the mother house was too small. Always short of money, Father Champagnat became an architect and a bricklayer to enlarge the house himself, with no other help than that of his novices. The incident at Marlis was but a precursor of more fierce opposition. All the priests in the vicinity knew that Father Champagnat was not exactly a luminary in seminary matters, that he had had the audacity to found a teaching congregation for poorly educated peasants was original, but that he had succeeded in the enterprise was insolent. The parish priest of La Valle, so favorable at the beginning, put himself at the head of the current of opposition. He contradicted his vicar in public, introduced songs to force him to suspend his sermons, discussed the theological value of his teachings. The priests lamented the conduct of Father Champagnat, who degraded the priestly dignity by working like a bricklayer, and who led these unfortunate young men to disaster. The campaign of opposition came to an end, following a denunciation perfidiously addressed to a great vicar of Lyon, who was also the founder of a congregation of teaching brothers, Bochart. It was intolerable for this high personage to discover a rival in an insignificant village vicar, so he omitted nothing to put him down. Fortunately, Father Champagnat had left an excellent memory among his former seminary directors who opposed the maneuvers of the great vicar. Very soon, the situation of the diocese changed. Bishop Depens, appointed apostolic administrator, was favorably impressed by Father Champagnat, while Bochart did not inspire any confidence in him. La Valle became uninhabitable for the founder. The increase in the number of brothers demanded his continued presence, which was incompatible with his other duties. Marcellin chose a piece of land near Saint-Chamond, bought it, and undertook, this time with the help of skilled masons, the construction of the great house of Notre-Dame de l'Hermitage. On All Saints' Day 1824, Marcellin left La Valle for good. He now had a new house full of brothers and novices. Everything was running smoothly. 2 priests were helping him. Unfortunately, a third one arrived. Since the seminary's plans for the foundation of the Congregation of Mary, Father Corville had played the role of spokesman and was considered more or less the leader of the group. Then came the priesthood, in which he had obtained no glory but only a few minor successes, so he was eager to try his talents elsewhere. He judged that the time was right for him to take the direction of the brothers gathered by Father Champagnat, whom he considered his inferior, and he came to settle at the Hermitage. There he was well received, for Father Champagnat had not forgotten him nor the plans of the seminary. He desired nothing else but to live humbly in obedience. Father Corville had no qualms about claiming for himself the first place in the house, although he was a little displeased to see that the brothers did not abandon their real father. He immediately wanted to reform the house to his liking, and was haughty and dismissive. At that time, Father Champagnat became seriously ill, and his house fell into disarray. The creditors became worried. The 2 auxiliary priests of the founder left. Many of the older brothers left the institute, and others were seriously thinking of imitating them. In the face of such a storm, Bishop Depins wondered if he should let such a sad experience continue. Hardly convalescent, Father Champagnat had to lavish himself excessively to restore peace to his scattered flock. The consequences of this crisis lasted a long time. The lack of authority had allowed an underhanded laxity to grow. The founder had always punished deviations harshly, and had never hesitated to dismiss individuals who were not sufficiently religious in spirit. He could not now, despite the reputation for excessive severity created for him by the surrounding priests, allow his institute to collapse. He stood up to it, attacking above all abuses in dealing with the people of the world and imposing the practice of poverty. His slogans were not well received. Very soon, a real opposition group was formed with a view to bringing about a change. The ringleaders launched the attack with criticisms and accusations on 3 points, which, in their opinion, were enough to demonstrate the arbitrary authoritarianism of the founder: the patched clothing, the torn cassock, and the use of a new method of teaching children to read. But in fact, it was about something else. Were the brothers religious or simply teachers? Faced with the imminent danger, Father Champagnat organized a demonstration of fidelity that ended with the expulsion of the 2 main culprits. In order to guarantee his brothers greater security, Father Champagnat wanted to obtain legal authorization for his congregation. The first steps taken were unsuccessful because of the Revolution of July 1830. His anti-clericalism did not, however, affect the institute, where vocations continued to flourish. The legal authorization had the effect of exempting the religious from military service, and Father Champagnat did not want to go without this privilege, so he reiterated his demands by letter. Having obtained no response, he decided in January 1838 to go to Paris. He multiplied his visits, solicited and obtained numerous supporters. When he left Paris in May, he had not been able to overcome the resistance of the Minister of Public Education. An agreement with Father Marcellin, founder of the Brothers of Saint-Paul-Trois Château, a congregation much less flourishing than his own, but which had legal authorization, allowed Father Champagnat's brothers not to enlist in military service. This denial of authority gave a pretext to the indefatigable counselors to suggest to Father Champagnat that his congregation be merged with some other congregation. He always refused, and after his death, it was his congregation that absorbed many others. Having become founder without having sought it, Father Champagnat had not forgotten the plans formed in 1816 at the Seminary of Lyon. The pseudo-leader of the group, Father Corville, after having failed in his attempts to demolish his work, made other ridiculous attempts, but in the meantime, Father Colin, in silence, had succeeded in founding the Association of Mary in the Diocese of Belley, and overcoming many difficulties, had also established it in Lyon. Father Champagnat contributed to its extension by directing to the new institution 9 priests, whom the Archbishop Administrator had successively given him as auxiliaries. He himself was admitted to the Society of Mary, and willingly accepted no longer to be the head of his brothers, but the delegate of the Superior General. Without this fact diminishing their friendship, Father Colin had understood that the 2 foundations were so different that they could never be entirely merged. Father Champagnat sent as assistants to the houses of the Marist Fathers, the brothers who were not able to teach, but this solution did not give the expected results, and Father Colin, after having taken the advice of his religious, created a new branch of brothers. Father Champagnat was saddened by this. Not without bitterness, he saw that the teaching brothers were increasing within the Society of Mary, and he thought that with this they were approaching a total separation. He wanted to remain a Marist, and his fervent desire was sincere, but it was not logical. Considering that the Institute of the Brothers could not be content with the oral direction of the beginnings of the congregation, he wrote and had printed in 1837 the Rule of the Little Brothers of Mary. He did not see this as pretentious superiority. He had the joy of dying a Marist, but the Holy See later demanded that the Superior General of the Marists relinquish all authority over the brothers. Father Champagnat was not yet old, but he was quite worn out. After his serious illness of 1825, he suffered from chronic gastritis, whose crises weakened him considerably. Clinical examinations showed that he was suffering from stomach cancer. He was so humble and so detached from everything that he took no pride in his work and meekly accepted to prepare his successor. Father Colin assembled the 99 professed brothers and had them elect a superior general, chosen from among themselves. The vows fell on Brother Francois, one of the founder's first disciples, whom he loved dearly. Brother Francois used his authority to maintain the congregation in its original line, both before and after the death of the father. Legally the owner of the properties of the Institute, Father Champagnat had them transferred by notarial act to the brothers of the council. The perpetuity of his work was assured. It only remained for him to give his little brothers the advice of vigilance and patience in cruel sufferings. On May 8, 1840, he celebrated Mass for the last time. On the 11th, he asked for extreme unction. A certain improvement encouraged hope, but the vomiting recurred so violently that he could not receive communion. On June 4th, a slight improvement allowed him, for the last time, to receive Holy Viaticum. He died on Saturday morning, June 6, 1840. Marcellin Champagnat was beatified by Pius XII on May 29, 1955.